Got your Mac guys, McMullen and McDonald here on Birds 365. And lo and behold, we have found Marcus Hayes. He's good enough to jump in with us and give us a couple of minutes of insight. Marcus has a all-around column that you got to cover everything in town, not just the Birds like Johnny Mac and I here on Birds 365. We're just talking about how you prep for a season and what kind of mindset you have to have as a player. What kind of mindset do you have to have as a cover-it-all columnist here in town? Can you put the Sixers' woes behind you as soon as it's over and done with and start to think about the Phillies and, look ahead to the Eagles? How difficult is it for a guy like you to do something like that?
Well, as John will tell you, I root for the most important person of all, me. I don't care if they win or lose. I just hope they say stupid things like, we can't do it alone, like Joel Embiid said, or me and Doc got along okay, like James Harden said. So that'll take you through an entire off season. But yeah, it's there's a lot of bandwidth. And what I do to sort of stay up with it, because I have 3 kids too, and so I'm super busy, is I listen to talk radio and podcasts more than I ever have before, because things will slip through, things will slip by. And we live in an electronic age where the people who are your sources assume that the electronics are always going to work. For example, yesterday, Daryl Morey talked at, I think, 12:30. The Sixers sent out an email the evening before, and our Sixers editor sent out a Slack. When the email hit, he said, "Okay, let's do this and this and this." And I was on yesterday. I didn't know until 8:30, taking one of my kids somewhere, that there was a 12:30 press conference, because the email went to junk mail, and our systems inside have been sabotaged apparently at the Inquirer.
Yeah, how about that?
So, the most important press conference, and Doc got fired the day before. So the most important press conference of the year, I didn't even realize it was happening until I heard about it on talk radio.
Nice.
So I was able to sort of scramble and cover. But it's kind of like herding cats, and the funny thing is, and John might be able to tell you this too, when Troy Vincent and Troy Aikman were playing against each other, I would transpose their names constantly. And sometimes, it would be like the editors wouldn't be able to tell that I transposed them, because the usage was conceivable that Troy Vincent had done what Troy Aikman had done, and Troy Aikman had done what Troy Vincent has done. And that's the example I use all the time, because the way that I remember names, I've discovered, is by the length of the last name. So Aikman and Vincent have the same number of letters, and the shape of the last name. And A and V are the same shape, just upside down. So that's the worst example. So to answer your question, it can be a challenge at times delineating between sports and coaches and GMs. And I cover a lot of golf. I cover the Olympics. So it's the best job in sports. It really is, doing all the things I get to do and traveling all the places I get to travel. But I really have to overstudy. Like, I just wrote down the Eagles' top 4 draft choices from this year and Nakobe Dean, because my contention is the Eagles are the best team at drafting for tomorrow. And that's really what they did with their entire draft this year and most of their draft last year. So in preparation for this show, Birds 365, I figured we'd be talking about a lot of, sort of the offseason stuff. But for God's sake, I mean, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, that's from the same school. Yeah. That's just not fair to me. That's not fair to me. I'm going to screw that up 1,000. And they're going to be playing next to each other.
Yeah.
And they're even approximately the same size.
Plus you got too many Jalens. We've had too many Jalens over the years. Yeah, I hear you, Marcus. It's painful. And I think
this is the 5th. I think this is like the 5th or 6th Jalen who is guaranteed to play for the Eagles over the last 3 years.
And sometimes you throw out, you're asking a coach talking about Jalen. They don't know what Jalen you're talking about.
Which Jalen are we talking about here?
Well, inside, John, they've got nicknames.
Yeah. Well,
Jalen Reagor and Jalen Hurts and whoever all have nicknames that everybody knows.
yeah.
But
I found out Alex Tanny's nickname, Sticks, yesterday. So
like the
call
river
Alex
sticks or the group sticks or the skinny leg sticks.
Skinny, I think because he was skinny. Plus he wore 11, so they called him Sticks in Tennessee. So the things you learn.
That's clever for Tennessee.
That is clever. Clever for Nashville. I want to talk about culture with you, Marcus, because I think it's unique. You're talking about you toggle back and forth. And obviously, we're talking in the Delaware Valley a lot about the Sixers culture right now. You get to see it up front. You get to see the Eagles culture, the Sixers culture, the Flyers culture, if they have one, the Phillies. Are the Eagles that far ahead of everybody else in town? Do you think from that perspective? And do you think it has more to do with the organization or the players? Because I want to throw this at you. Yesterday was the day, every spring they have that first day where they bring out some veteran players. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking this is Groundhog Day, right? We're going to get Kelsey and Brandon and maybe Pletch and Lane or some conglomeration. We only got one. We got Kels. But those guys, they've been here forever. And, has it got more to do with them that the Eagles have this great culture? Or is it Jeffrey Lurie, the organization? Or are they not that much better than everybody else?
Well, we've seen this culture be bad. We've seen the Eagles have a bad culture, have a fractured culture. The reason the Eagles have the current culture is because of Vontae's Perfect. In 2016, Vontae's Perfect. In 2016, it's a curveball. Yeah. Well, it's what do you call it? Whisper down the lane, connect the dots. In 2016, Vontae's Perfect was chasing Carson Wentz to the sideline, where Zach Ertz was prepared to block Vontae's Perfect, and then declined to do so. He chickened out. He ran away. Like Sir Robin in the Holy Grail, he fled. The next day, Howard Eskin very pointedly asked Doug Peterson, the rookie head coach, who probably never, you can talk about Mike Lombardi all you like. He's right. Doug probably should never have gotten a job. Asked him, are some of your players not playing as hard as they should be or whatever? And Doug said, yeah, you're right. If you remember, Rodney McLeod also twice declined to put his nose in the dirt in a goal line stand as the safety. So the day after that, Tuesday, Malcolm Jenkins led a contingent of torch and pitchfork wavers to Doug Peterson's office and said, how dare you throw us under the bus? And Doug Peterson, probably the smartest thing he ever did, besides agreeing to the Philly special, Philly, was he said, okay, fine. If you think I'm doing a bad job policing your locker room, you do it. Which one of you said something to Zach Ertz? Which one of you said something to Rodney McLeod? So I think that was like game 9 in 2016. And at that point, Doug Peterson said, we'll form like a captain's committee or whatever it's called, John. Yeah. And we'll meet on whatever day, Wednesday, Tuesday, and whatever your grievances are, what is it? The airing of the grievances from Seinfeld. We will air our grievances on that day and go forward. That created the culture you see now. All of a sudden, Fletcher Cox couldn't be a goof off anymore. He had to represent the defensive line. All of a sudden, Carson Wentz, for better or worse, had to represent the offense. Kelsey had to represent the offensive line. And Malcolm Jenkins, who's probably the best leader they've had in the last 50 years, except for Brian Dawkins. Malcolm Jenkins represented the defensive backs and really the whole team. We talk a lot about, Kelsey being this guy or that guy. Malcolm Jenkins was the guy that ran that team. I agree. That culture remains today. So last year you had Darius Slay and Fletcher Cox, thing 1 and thing 2 in the pantheon of goof-offs and, guys you don't expect to be great leaders, pulling aside C.J. Gardner-Johnson and saying, this is how we do stuff here. that's the culture you have, and that's why they drafted Jalen Carter, because they think that culture will help keep him between. This is a horrible analogy, but it'll help keep him between the white lines and the guardrails.
Let me follow up on the team group dynamic of the coaches picking veteran players, some volunteering to be leaders and be part of a committee to sit down and, as you say, air the grievances. Andy did that, right? So was it the Chip era where that got dropped? Did Peterson not install it the day that he came back to be the head coach, having been under Andy Reid as long as he was?
Andy Reid didn't do that. And
he didn't have a veteran committee.
No, he didn't have a veteran committee like this. This veterans committee has a voice, and the coach listens to it and does stuff. Andy Reid's culture, one of the reasons Andy Reid is so despised by so many people in the league is that he'll sign anybody. He doesn't care about culture. He cares about results. He believes that his personality, the strength of his personality, will keep things stable. And we've seen, between players getting in trouble, saying things, his sons, on staff, one guy dies of a heroin overdose on team property.
It's astonishing, Marcus. I wasn't here at the time.
And the other guy driving home from a team facility, gets into a car crash that almost kills 3 people, including himself, and he's in jail. So no, Andy Reid doesn't have a culture. Andy Reid has a roster. Andy Reid hires mercenaries as coaches and players and hopes that the people who are of high character will take care of the rest. Patrick Mahomes' brother is in the news.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a lot of talent down there, but if Kansas City was a Philadelphia or LA or New York or Boston, it would be considered a renegade organization. And the myth of Andy Reid is just it's astonishing to watch. I've never gotten that. Andy Reid is a very strong personality, and he runs the franchise that he's in. But this is the guy whose signature move in Philadelphia was making George Hegeman push a blocking sled up and down the practice turf out behind the vet in his first training camp, and then cutting him. Yeah. I mean, players hate Andy Reid.
Some worship at the altar of Andy Reid.
Yeah, I think a lot of superstars do. Like Travis does. Travis Kelce, Patrick. Obviously, he's very close to quarterbacks.
No, I mean from that era, from the Eagles era.
Yeah,
Reid has a lot more in common with Belichick than he does with Tony Dungy.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I wasn't here, but I will say I don't want to re-legislate, but I'm always, to this day, Marcus. I think it was 2012 when Garrett passed away at training camp with enough steroids to fuel the entire NFL
as a strength coach. On an NFL team. I'm always shocked that to this day, that's not the biggest scandal in NFL history. I'm amazed. It's astonishing. I've done my part. I've done all I can do. When Andy got fired at the end of that year, I said, this is what you're getting. This culture is what you're getting. This is going to happen again. And guess what? It happened again.
Yeah. And by the way, they both of his sons got in trouble that same day. I think that was, and you were here. I wasn't here. I think that was the start of the downfall of Andy Reid in Philadelphia because he had to go away. He did that. And all of a sudden, Joe Banner stepped in, took some sort of power vacuum. I think that started the end, but you were there. You probably know a little bit better. Maybe we can legislate that down the road because it's a very interesting story.
Well, it's funny because the year, so Andy gets fired, and the next training camp, I walk up to Jason Peters, who had the Achilles injuries that year, and I asked him, I was like, you think if you played, Andy's still a coach? I believe this is the right timeline. And he said, absolutely. I'm that good. I would make that big a difference. He's the best player on the team. He's the best player on the team for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't
Oh, yeah.
close,
Yeah.
you know, but he was like, yeah, absolutely. Andy would still be here. We'd have won enough games, yada, yada, yada. So I said that to say, like, in spite of the culture issues and in spite of the personnel issues and in spite of Andy being Andy, he has good football teams that have chances to win with the proper personnel. And certainly, I think one of the things that Howie learned that year in particular is that you have to have offensive line depth, real depth. And it has to be kind of like backup quarterback depth. So if you think you have a chance to win, you have this extreme luxury of 1 or 2 starting caliber offensive linemen who you've spent money on and who you spent draft picks on, or else it is not feasible. It's not viable. You can plug and play every other position, but offensive line and quarterback, you cannot plug and play.
All right, so let me circle back to John's question. We got off on a little bit of a tangent. Very interesting tangent at that. Thank you, Marcus. But the Eagles culture right now, Nick Sirianni comes in, rookie head coach, doesn't handle his first press briefing all that well. People are going, Nick who? Saban? Sirianni? What the hell? And since the day he took over, the culture's been pretty darn good, and he has aligned his leaders in the locker room, and they had good veterans the day he walked in the door, and they're still damn good veterans, and they're keys to the Eagles' success last year. Did he just do this of his own? Was he this good, this ingrained in how a culture of a football team should work? Did he take guidance from a guy like Howie Roseman, who was here under Doug Peterson, who you said did the right thing after an early stumble out of the block, put his ducks in a row to keep the leadership in position? How did the Eagles come about the culture that they have right now?
Well, as I said, it's all stems from the Vontaze Burfict incident. And Nick Sirianni is coincidental to the success of this team. This team was excellently built, has stayed very, very healthy, and the culture that existed when he arrived remains. If you guys remember, I think it was the Flower Power speech that got leaked out, or he leaked it himself.
Before
the Detroit Lions game, right? And after the Detroit Lions game, I think Jason Kelce broke the locker room post-game huddle with something like Flower Power or Roots on 3 or something like that. At that point, Nick Sirianni was accepted by the culture that already existed. He has nothing to do with the existence of the culture that the Philadelphia Eagles have right now. It's Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson and Fletcher Cox. It's Brandon Graham. You know, you get a guy like Hassan Reddick who totally fits the culture, who is incredibly professional, who wants to win, who wants to work. You know, these are Howie Roseman decisions. These are not Nick Sirianni decisions. He doesn't influence it. He's happy to have it. But, you know, if you look at what Nick Sirianni has done in the last 6 months, you could argue that he is completely dismissive of culture. You cannot hire Matt Patricia and worry and be concerned about your culture. You can't fire Denard Wilson, right?
Yeah.
And think that it's not going to matter. The most volatile player on your team is Darius Slay, who endorsed Denard Wilson to be defensive coordinator and who despises Matt Patricia. Darius Slay is one of your, you know, I can't believe I'm saying this, you know, knowing who he is and the kind of guy he is. Not that he's a bad guy, but he's kind of a wafty guy. He's one of the biggest leaders on the team. And you have just spat in his face twice. Nick Sirianni, if anything, needs a lesson in culture.
Wow. This is why I love Marcus. He is not afraid to take a strong opinion.
And that's not a shot at Sean Desai. You know, Sean Desai is an innocent bystander here. But, you know,
now, that's why I brought up at the beginning, though, when I brought up, and you just mentioned, Kelce, Brandon, Lane, Fletcher, this so-called core 4 of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, we've been saying this for years, but I really think this is it for Jason Kelce. I said that this time last year, but I really think this is it. He's out at the broadcast boot camp. He loves doing the podcast. This is it. If he does leave, Lane has started, hey, 2 more years. He started saying that about November. If he goes, Fletcher, sort of a descending player. We all know Brandon said 15 years. I want to get to 15 years. Then he's out. When those guys leave, is it then incumbent on Nick Sirianni to care about that culture? Because I don't think it's easy to replace those guys. And I'll go out to Chicago, Marcus. I don't know if you saw it, but Ryan Poles, the GM out there, basically admitted on air on a station out there, I couldn't take Jalen Carter. The Eagles could because of that locker room and that group. I think he would have loved to have taken Jalen Carter from the way he talked. Can't prove it, but from the way he talked. But he admitted, can't do it. Young GM, can't take that kind of chance. Does everything change? Does everything have to ramp up when these 4 guys walk out the door?
When does the season start this year? What's the first day? What do you guys remember, like the September 9th or something like that?
I want to say 10th.
Okay. So on September 10th, those 4 guys are irrelevant. On September 10th, this becomes Jalen Hurts' team. He's making $260 million. He's of an unimpeachable character. He has an unparalleled work ethic, and he is not afraid of anyone. So though they have the replacement already, they have Peyton Manning. They have the guy that's going to run the franchise. Furthermore, on the other side of the ball, I'm convinced that Nakobe Dean, who is a dynamic person, is going to be a dynamic player. And we've already seen the character of Hassan Reddick. So they're covered. I don't think you'll see as much of Fletcher and Brandon in the locker room this year in deference to Nakobe Dean, Hassan Reddick, and Jordan Davis, who also seems to be a pretty remarkable guy. So I think we're going to see a torch pass, John, but the torch bearer clearly is Jalen Hurts, who has been the same exact high character guy, sometimes a little petty, sometimes a little snippy, but the same exact high character guy from the day he was drafted in the 2nd round, sat behind Carson Wentz for 12 games, started for 4 games, endured 2 off seasons of his own team looking for improvements, and came out the other side as an MVP candidate, smelling like roses. So their culture is covered. And you got to credit Jeffrey Lurie for that.
Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, who got the deal done and got Jalen locked up.
Lurie,
credit to Howie Roseman for getting the deal done.
Jeffrey Lurie. Jeffrey Lurie is the one who wanted to draft Jalen Hurts, and Jeffrey Lurie's writing the check. Jeffrey Lurie said to Howie Roseman, do what you have to do, but none of it happens without Jeffrey Lurie. Entering last season, Jeffrey Lurie wasn't looking for somebody to – or entering last offseason, not this past offseason, but the one before. Jeffrey Lurie wasn't looking for someone to run the team. He was completely sold on Jalen Hurts. Howie Roseman was. You have to credit Jeffrey Lurie, who wanted to draft Jalen Hurts more than Doug or Howie did. Jeffrey Lurie, this is his baby. He wanted to draft Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, but hold on a minute, Marcus. If that were the case, and again, you're on top of this, John's on top of those questions for both you guys. They investigated Deshaun Watson. We all agree on that, right? They looked into it.
Oh, yeah.
They asked if Deshaun would consider playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. If you don't get to that, to get to that point, the owner has to give his blessing. You don't even have the conversation. You don't investigate Deshaun Watson if the owner doesn't say, yeah, my team, my Philadelphia Eagles, we would take Deshaun Watson as the quarterback under the right situation and circumstances. So then he's in the same place as Howie Roseman. They were both looking for a potential replacement for Jalen Hurts. So how does Jeffrey get all the credit and Howie gets none?
As I said, that was a Howie Roseman production. Jeffrey Lurie said, I employ you to do the best thing for the team. The day that I say you can't go look at that guy or we can't be interested in that guy for the right deal is the day I need to fire you because you have to do your job. I mean, you look across the street, that's what Daryl Morey's doing right now with James Harden. I don't believe the Sixers ownership is sold on James Harden. Daryl Morey certainly is. So you have to listen to the guy who's making whose job it is to evaluate this stuff and make decisions. I would contend that there would have been very little interest in Deshaun Watson if Tom Donahoe had been the Eagles general manager, because Jeffrey Lurie was not that interested in Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, for that matter. You know, all the guys that were rumored to be moving, the big three that were rumored to be moving last offseason. He loved Jalen Hurts. He thought Jalen Hurts had a very high ceiling, made a lot of sense for them, and wanted to see what they had. But he's employing a guy who's the executive of the year 2 times now. You'd be foolish not to listen to him and indulge him. Excuse me. But I will say this. Had they gotten to the point where they might have been able to acquire Deshaun Watson, you know, after Dom DeSandro went down there and did his investigations or whatever, I'm not sold that they would have, because
never given him that contract. Never. I agree. Now I give Jeffrey Lurie a ton of credit. Jody knows this. I think, you know, he doesn't get enough credit for being a strong owner. When they need something, they don't have to worry about Jalen Hurts' contract. They don't have to worry about escrow. I don't think he would have given Deshaun Watson the contract he got. So ultimately, even if he considered Philadelphia, I don't think he would have been here. But I mean, this team, and they want us to forget. I tell Jody this all the time, Marcus. They want us to forget. Oh, they wanted Russell Wilson. They wanted Deshaun Watson. They were not sold on Jalen Hurts. And now there's sort of this revisionist history where, and they did a great job with Jalen, by the way. They were still moving forward. They were still developing. I think where Jeffrey was completely sold on Jalen Hurts was as a person. I mean, I think we were all sold on Jalen Hurts as a person, just the work ethic, the character, his ability. And I want to circle back to the Sixers with that, him versus Joel Embiid. Couldn't be a vastly different. I'm not there all the time with the Sixers. You are. I think they were sold on Jalen Hurts, the person, but I don't think they were sold on Jalen Hurts, the football player. And they were uncovering every rock to get better at the most important position.
Well, then you're calling Jeffrey Lurie a liar, because after they won the NFC Championship game, I have written several times in this phrasing. You know, the project quarterback has been a huge success, and he pulled me aside after everybody was talking to him outside the the coach's locker room, and he said, "Listen, I've seen you several times write that we consider Jalen Hurts a project quarterback. And that's true to a degree, but I never did. I thought Jalen Hurts could have started as a rookie. I thought Jalen Hurts was going to have a gigantically high ceiling. I'm glad that it's worked out. I've been a Jalen Hurts guy all along." And I was like, well, what about the other guys, Jeffrey? He's like, look, we have to do our due diligence. You know, these are accomplished players. We have to do our due diligence. But at the end of the day, I believe this. Now, I don't get to, you know, I don't put my foot down and tell the coaches and GM, no, we're going to do this with this big a decision. Because, again, that's why we're here. So after he said that, after he told me that, I spent about 24 hours asking around. Like, was Jeffrey, you know, as eager to get Russell Wilson or as eager to get Deshaun Watson or whoever as, you know, other people in the building? And the answer was consistently no. And I wrote that column. So that's, you know, you can disbelieve him. You can say it's revisionist if you like. But I don't think I've ever had Jeffrey Lurie lie to me.
No, I think lie is too strong a word. Like, you remember the famous press conference where Jeffrey said he was only involved in 3 picks in his history as an owner. One was Russell Wilson. Another was Jordan Mailata. And the third, I can't remember. I don't think it was Jalen Hurts. The third, I can't remember. I'll try to look it up as we get to break. Yeah,
He didn't cop to the Stanford wide receiver that they took in the second round.
No, he did not comp to he did not admit JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah.
Now, look, Jody asked me all the time, did the Eagles say Jalen Hurts couldn't be a starter when they drafted him? That's not how football people talk. I mean, they take the 90th guy on the roster. They just signed Charleston Rambo. They're not going to say, oh, he can't do this. They're going to talk about what he can do. So they talk about things in a certain way. But yeah, I'll say to Jeffrey, and I'll say it to his face, yeah, I'm calling shenanigans if you say you're involved with 3 picks and they just happen to be all home runs. You know, it wasn't JJ. It wasn't Jalen Reagor. It wasn't some of the things that went off the rails. It was Russell Wilson, which was the white whale of this team. This team can't stop talking about Russell Wilson, Marcus. Oh, we love Russell Wilson. What, they loved him so much, pick him in the 2nd round. Don't wait till the 3rd round and get usurped by another team. And Jordan Mailata, obviously, I mean, let's give Stout some credit there. And I have to look up the 3rd one. But it was also a home run. It might have been Lane.
Nobody gets credit for 7th round picks.
Yeah.
You know, the Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelsey stuff. Again, your logic is if you love Russell Wilson so much in the 3rd, if you love him so much, you pick him in the 2nd round. Yeah. Well, if you knew Jordan Mailata and Jason Kelsey were going to be what they're going to be, they don't last
the 1st round.
You know, you don't draft them on day 3. You got lucky. You know. Yeah. But yeah, it's you know, I'm not sure about the timeline when Jeffrey said that. But you know, I do know that, you know, he's pulled me aside 5 times in the 28 years I've covered the team. And each time, you know, it's proven to be true. And, you know, I think he's a lot less involved now, especially than he has been in the past. And I think it's gone up and down. When Andy got real power, Jeffrey was no longer involved. But when Ray Rhodes was here, after a couple of years, he was very involved. And I think when Chip was here, he wasn't involved early or late in those 3 years. And when Doug was here, he was involved the entire time up to his hips, you know. Not necessarily with draft picks, but with draft picks and play calling and coaching and development and roster and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But I will say, you know, in general, Jeffrey is involved as he thinks he needs to be. He'd much rather not be involved. He'd much rather sort of hire the right people and let them do their job. And when he's hired the right people and let them do their job, those 2 things have happened nicely. When he, for example, in 2017, after Howie hired Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel, Jeffrey was very hands-off with the personnel at that point. It was Howie's last chance, if you remember. He had come back from exile, and it was his last. And I think 2017 was his last year, because I fired him after 2016. He did some horrible things in 2016. You know, that team was a clown show. But when after he made the moves in 2016, he hired those 2 guys, and they and Howie sort of set the ship straight. And I think Howie learned a lot from Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel, who have expertise that he doesn't have. And I think both of them benefited from being with Howie as well.
So then here's a quick key question for me. What is Jeffrey Lurie's opinion of Nick Sirianni as of right now? You say he's less involved than he used to be, but he's more involved than it sometimes. So his involvement is what it is. What is his opinion of his 3rd-year head coach?
Well, I believe it was it's either the Jets or the Giants game 2 years ago, John. You remember they had back-to-back Meadowlands trips?
Yeah.
And Jalen played really great in one of them, and Gardner Minshew played really great in the other.
Yeah.
It was after one of those
Gardner
trips.
Against the Jets, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So it was after one of those games. I asked Nick Sirianni whether the Tuesday meetings were continued, and he said no. The Tuesday meetings being the meetings that the Athletic reported that Howie and Jeffrey would speak with Doug Peterson even after wins where the offense had played well and suggest that maybe they should do X or Y, usually pass more or whatever. Yeah. And that was clearly
the Green Bay game. They upset the Packers, and why didn't you throw it more?
But that was relatively common, and you know that was clearly leaked by Doug Peterson after he'd been fired and held this resentment. But And I think Jeffrey learned from that, you know? So to answer your question, Jody, I think when he hired Nick Sirianni, number one, Nick Sirianni was his candidate. Nick Sirianni was a guy that he did the research on, a guy that had sort of like shown up and shown out as an interview, the way Andy Reid did. It wasn't Chip Kelly, who was the flavor of the month, and it wasn't Doug Peterson, who Andy Reid told Jeffrey Lurie to hire. You know, he said, "Look, just hire Doug, and everything else will work out." Hire Jim Schwartz first.
That's true.
Then hire Doug. Then hire Doug's entire staff.
Now, you know, Marcus, though, they were trying to hire Adam Gase back then.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Crazy eyes.
And they had
wait, who was the Seattle defensive coordinator?
Gus Bradley.
Gus Bradley. That was too. Chip. Yeah, the Chip when Chip was saying he wasn't going to leave. The Doug year, it was Adam Gase first, and then Ben McAdoo. And as the story goes, Ben was on the way down the Jersey Turnpike when the Giants got to take the job when the Giants got him to turn around.
Right, and was Coughlin the Doug?
Coughlin. A lot of people say Coughlin was the third. I don't know. I never got confirmation of that. Maybe you did.
Well, it reminds me. You remember when Charlie got hired by the Phillies? They were like done with the search, and then Jim Leland told somebody in Pittsburgh or Florida, "Hey, I wouldn't mind being a candidate for that job." Yeah. So they had to interview Jim Leland. So Jim Leland interviews, and I have his number from somewhere. I don't know where I got it. And he interviews. He's going home. So I call him, and I was like, "Hey, Jim, this is Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Daily News. I worked for Daily News at that point." And I was like, "Hey, can you talk for a minute about your interview?" And he's like, "Yeah, hold on, Marcus. Okay, go ahead." I was like, "How'd it go?" He's like, "I think they're going to give the job to Charlie. I think they got their mind made up. It's not a problem. He's a good guy. He's a good manager. Probably a better fit. Yeah, hold on a second." All right. So car door opens, car door closes. 6 minutes later, car door open, car door closes. Jim's like, "All right, I'm back." I was like, "Is everything okay?" Jim says, "Yeah, I just had to buy some cigarettes."
Oh, that's Leland. I can guarantee you that.
He was driving. He had driven from Pittsburgh. He was driving home on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, saw a number he didn't recognize, answered the call, trusted that I was who I said I was, put me on hold, get coffee and cigarettes from a rest area, and talked to me for 10 minutes more, getting back on the Turnpike, which I think was illegal back then. I don't think you could have your cell phone up. And Jim Leland didn't have a Bluetooth or a headset in 2005 or 6 or whatever it was. So, but yeah, the Coughlin candidacy reminded me of the Jim Leland episode where you had a guy who wanted to be a candidate. You know, I think Jeffrey was interested in him sort of theoretically, but I don't think Jeffrey was interested in dealing with the Tom Coughlin experience in Philadelphia, which would have been a disaster.
Yeah. Well, I think Adam Gase would have been. That would have been fun. That would have been fun.
Oh, so much with Crazy Eyes. Remember that guy? Oh man, that would have been fun. Where'd he go? Miami.
Yeah. He came in. Remember, this was coming off Chip, and he wanted everything. He wanted power over everything. Mm-hmm. Yep. The Eagles were ready to hire him. Yep. And he was like, "I need this. I need that."
So what about Mike?
He was a loser in 2 places, Miami and the Jets.
Right,
he's the Jets coach. Don't forget, he was the Jets coach. He's worse with the Jets than he was with Miami.
Everybody is. What about now? Who's the guy? The guy in Miami? No, the guy in Miami now took over for Flores, right?
Yeah.
So they've gone from Gase, who's insane, to Flores, who accused the owner of wanting to lose on purpose, to this guy, Mike
McDaniel.
McDaniel, who dances during the stretches. Have you seen this video?
Oh yeah, he's a knucklehead. Yeah,
I mean, it's just what kind of program is that? Like, can't they hire and
the whole time he's trying to get Tom Brady to break every rule and try to come to take over the It
is an absolute clown show down there.
Yeah. Talk about culture. Yeah, culture coming down from Stephen Ross. Not the best in Miami. I think we can all agree on that one. Marcus, thank you very much for hanging as long as you did. Appreciate it, buddy.
That's
We'll
all I
you
get.
back up again
Thanks,
soon
brother.
enough.
That's all I get.
At Extend Wretch, by the way. Follow Marcus on Twitter, Inquirer.com, Sports Radio WIP. You can listen to him there. The tremendous Marcus Hayes. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, boys. See you later.
Marcus Hayes from the Inquirer. 40 minutes. We kept Marcus. We try and hold him to about 20,
Marcus
25.
is great. We got
Marcus just goes. He's like a top. You wind him up and you let him go.
We got in the Garrett Reid discussion, Jeffrey. Yeah, I've got that now. Marcus is much closer to Jeffrey than I am. He's been around for 28 years. But yeah, there are times, I say Jeffrey Lurie, Eagles fans don't appreciate how good an owner Jeffrey Lurie is. I say it all the time. But there are certain things I'll call shenanigans on. Like I said, those 3 draft picks. I mean, give me a break, Jeffrey. The coaching stuff during the Doug Peterson era. No, he was too involved. And the fact that this team was looking to move on from Jalen Hurts. It's not my fault.
Right. And here's
they
where
were like everybody else.
Here's where I'll part ways with Marcus on Jeffrey can do no wrong. So you're gonna tell me that Jeffrey, draft night, as we see from time to time, the pounding of the table, jumped in and said, "We're taking Jalen Hurts with this second round selection." That he was that much in control that he dictated the Eagles' second round pick in the draft. But a year later, I can't really tell Howie what to do. If I'm going to tell Howie what to do, then why would I have him as the general manager? If he's got the job, I got to let him do his job. So you'll dictate draft picks, but you won't dictate the acquisition of a guy who's been in so much trouble, the league doesn't even know how to handle him going forward. You'll leave that responsibility to somebody else, but a second-round draft pick, you're going to dictate, we're taking this quarterback, who we may have as a backup, but I have foreseen the future, and he's going to become an MVP candidate. Come on. Really?
I mean, there's certain things, and that's got to be approved at the highest level if you're even going to have the discussion with Deshaun Watson. It was by the way, all the Deshaun Watson stuff, I wrote about it way back in the day. It's essentially a 10-minute phone call, maybe less, because he wasn't coming here for whatever reason. Now, later, I learned he's very close to Jalen Hurts. They worked out with the same quarterbacks coach.
Right.
And from everything I got, Deshaun did not want to take Jalen's opportunity away from Jalen Hurts. They were very close. Now, as I said at the time, if he had no other opportunities, I think he would have considered it. But everybody wanted Deshaun Watson, basically, even with all the problems. Everybody looking for a quarterback, obviously. I hope people understand what I'm saying. So he had plenty of other options. Atlanta's going after him hard. Carolina's going after him hard. Cleveland's going after a bunch of other teams. Get tons of options. So he's like, I don't want to upset what Jalen's got going on. But yeah, I mean, come on. Are we gonna? And Russell Wilson, the Eagles never stopped talking about the damn guy from when they missed out on him in the draft. Oh, we just would have gotten Russell Wilson. I mean, like I said, he's their white whale. Now they're thrilled. Obviously,
I was going to say they should be glad they missed the white whale again, because had they traded made the kind of deal that the
but that's the
Broncos
same thing.
did.
And you and I talk about it all the time. NFL teams don't like, and we got to hit the break. I know they don't like the term luck, but as Marcus brought up, there's a lot of luck involved with Jordan Mailata and Jason Kelsey. Let's be honest. I mean, they developed him, but nobody's sitting there taking a center in the 6th round, saying, "Oh, now Howie will tell the story of Howard Mudd saying." First time he's going to start. And maybe that's true. But nobody's taking anybody in the 6th round going, oh, he's going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, come on.
Now that's where luck does come involved. All right, long segment. We'll take a quickie timeout. Ben Solak, the Ring, is going to join us coming up less than 15 minutes. Stay right here.